What I'm doing right now is I'm videotaping where the wires go. Uh, you notice the volume control isn't affixed to the circuit board like most transistor radios. It mounts inside the case. This is a Westinghouse. It's pretty nice. I don't see any major scratches, dents, scratches, nothing major. The person even included the box that it comes in, or that it came in, along with the case, which probably never has been used. Some people even has a cleaning cloth. Some people get radios, has the owner's guide, and they really never use them because these old transistor radios, if you have good hearing and you really like music, they don't exactly have great sound. Okay, they're more for like the baseball game and rock and roll music. They weren't for classical music or relaxation music. But this is an 8 transistor. It has a 1 microfarad capacitor up by the volume control. It's open. Here it is here. It's a different brand than the last video. It's open. Okay. It's got a 10. All right. And then it's got a 100 and one I can't read until I get the other one out. And of course, I told you my diagram. Where is my diagram? Okay. Even I, after all these years, I do a diagram of where the capacitors go, plus and minus. And here's the one that I have to take this one out in order to read it. Okay? Because you can get carried away. You start taking parts out of a radio, and you'll swear you're going to remember, and you won't. And my father was real bad. Even when you would approach him and say, "Remember the last time you did this?" He would say no, he wouldn't remember that, and then he'd insist, and then he would screw up, and then he'd get me, and I have to put the thing back together again. Okay, and that's why I have a real problem with people that think they know how to do things that they don't. It's because I suffered through it. Uh, if people had given me the thing in the first place, it'd have been a 1, 2, 3 fix. Okay, but that's not what I used to get. I used to get all the junk or all the things that other people would mess with, and they would never be in the right area. They break things. They would remove things and lose it, and it would be a lot of work to get it back together. Now, one thing I want to tell you, this is an 8 transistor. Okay, I showed you the insides of the 6, and this is a Westinghouse also. And this has 8, and this has 6, and this has um, a 5 microfarad at the volume control, a 10, and a 47 and a 30 microfarad. So it's a little bit different, even though it's the same company. Uh, the volume control is part of the circuit board. You don't have all those extra wires that can. And these wires, for some reason, uh, they're more like steel. And if you flex them too much, they break off where they're soldered. And be very careful of that. You know, a lot of people just say, "I just recap it." There's a skill to recapping. You have to be pretty good at soldering. Okay, if you're a beginner solderer and you touch one of these radios, you're going to get a solder bridge. You're going to get all the capacitors in the right place, but you're going to have made a mistake and you're not going to be able to find it. And that's it. Okay, and then you'll go on one of the groups and tell people different things and check this, check that. And they're always telling you the wrong thing. Okay, your problem was you didn't know how to solder. You were sloppy. You don't understand what a solder trace bridge is, and that's what happens. But I go and I look through the different groups, and it's really, some of it's really bad information. Okay, they're just repeating what they've heard. None of them actually done the work. Okay, but what I want to tell you is you'll see people asking for schematics. Now, there are generic schematics for a 6 transistor radio, an 8 transistor radio, a 10 uh, by RCA or by a Westinghouse. and they all basically use the same circuit. Okay, so you're gonna have to use a little bit of interpolation to be able to repair the radio, unless you want to pay 16 plus shipping or whatever it is to get a set of schematics for the radio. Now they actually show you the traces and where the parts are on those schematics if you get a good set. All right, so you might say, well, it's worth it. Well, it's gonna be more expensive than the radio, and there's so many versions of each radio that you might not actually get the exact schematic to help you out. And the other thing is too, you have to understand how the radio actually works, the components. So you're not going to fix it, okay? And there are people that buy the radio and they just want it for what it looks like. Now this is a Westinghouse 8 transistor. Notice it's got two windows for the volume control and the tuning. Okay, it gives you a number, you know, what the volume level is at. It's just lipstick on a pig, more sizzle than steak. The other kind, this is slightly nicer Westinghouse. It just shows you the tuning, okay? But it was all about marketing, okay? And they kept giving you the same insides. And you could build this radio 10 different ways, or even more, and then give the person the same circuit board on each one. And people don't understand what's on the circuit board. Okay, they don't understand it any further than this is the battery. And some of the radios have a battery with a clip on each end, and it's slightly round. And then there was one, I think it was a 15 volt they used, the real early ones. And that's as far as the person understands what the radio has. There may be a speaker, okay? And when they first come out, my dad had a TV repair shop in 1960. Summit Radio and TV. I can actually remember it with my Uncle Chuck. My father had it with my Uncle Chuck, and it was in North Arlington. It's on Stevens Place. It was in where the old shoemaker was. And people would bring the radio in, and they dropped it. And they thought that it would be able to fix it. And my father, on a small break, he would bridge the solder. He would, with his big 30-watt soldering iron gun. It was a Weller. It looked like a gun. And he would recoat the traces with solder, and it's just going to crack again. What you have to do is you got to get yourself like an 18 gauge wire, stranded wire, and you strip it back and you take single strands off the wire, and you tin them, and then you lay them across each crack. All right, that way if the radio flexes later on, the wire is across the solder connection and it won't break. Okay. The other thing was I even hate handling this because I know that wire on that volume control is going to break. These ferrite rods would break in half, and you'd get some stations, and they wouldn't be in the right place on the dial. The whole thing would be off, and nobody sold a replacement back then. So they would break the connector for the battery. They'd actually bring the radio in. They'd put a brand new battery in the radio, turn it on, and forget it's on. Then when they go to use the radio, it would be dead, and they'd bring the radio into my father. The first thing my father would do is put a battery in it. And a lot of them would just take the radio from my father and walk out. They wouldn't buy a battery there. It was just like, thanks, you know. That's why my father really wasn't real happy about transistor radios. And his eyesight, he was 44 years old when he opened the repair shop, and he couldn't really see. I could still see fairly good, but his eyesight was worse. And he had this giant fluorescent light with a big lens in the middle of it. And an inspection light, they used to call them years ago. And he'd be under that, and he'd be resoldering the traces. And I have a different way that I used to repair radios for people, that they'd be fixed. But the things that would go bad were, of course, the battery. The case would get broken along with the circuit board. The antenna would get broken. That's it. That's it. Oh, and the volume control would get worn out and so scratchy that's it. Okay. Now this one here, there's two ears on the inside of this case that the volume control mounts to. I've never seen that before. I've seen these volume controls. Radio Shack sold them, and most radios have. You can't see this one down in there, but most radios have this kind that actually solder to the circuit board. And this one, like this, must have been for the better radios. And I never had better radios until I got to a certain age. And when I bought something, I made sure it was a good model. But yeah, the volume control just gets so scratchy after a while. Um, and people say, "Oh, just spray it." No, that's not what's in a volume control. A volume control has a circuit board in there that this little um, arm runs on. No, it's not the right thing. It's an arm, but it's a connector or a conductor or anyway, it runs back and forth on the resistive trace that they made. Now, how you can fix it is you take a very soft pencil, you take the knob off, and you recoat it with the pencil. And then as you're coating it with the pencil, and pencil's not lead, it's graphite. Graphite is resistive. And you work the pencil on that part that's worn out. And it does two things. It fixes it, and it's graphite's a lubricant. Okay? So the moving contact, let's call it a moving contact point, starts working again. And it won't be crackly. And after a few months, it will go bad again. And I used to do the kitchen radio. I would take it apart and fix it for my mother. I'd recoat it. And then finally, uh, when I got older and I could go get parts, I'd go get a new volume control and put it in there. Because when I was younger, there was only one place to get parts, would be Lafayette Radio. Now, if you wanted to drive over to Berger Electronics on Bloomfield, the corner of Bloomfield Avenue and Watsessing in Bloomfield, his name was Cy Berger, and you could get some type of replacement part. And he sold volume controls that had real long shafts on them, and you had to cut them to length, and that's what I would do when I got older. But there's so many ways you can fix something. I never spray any control. Okay, I think I showed you in past videos. Uh, this thing's so worn out, and these go for big money. This is an eraser for ink eraser. It used to have a string on it. Well, these things are real expensive now, but this is what I use to clean relay contacts. And then I found this in Staples. This is an eraser. It's a lot softer, but you work any kind of contact with this, and it takes off only the oxide and leaves the metal behind. On any contact, you never use sandpaper. Now, there's people that tell you, always use wood sandpaper, never use emery paper, because emery paper has little metal fibers in it. You've just destroyed most of everything out there using any kind of sandpaper. What I use is a good old-fashioned eraser. And what you take off is the oxide. It leaves the contacts dry. Okay? On switching relays or anything, you don't want any kind of lubricant on there. Because as the contacts open, there's an arc. And if the spray is slightly flammable, or some oils are flammable at certain temperatures, you're going to do a lot of damage. And that's what I tell you, when I was a repairman, I always got something after somebody sprayed it. Now, one guy, there was a high-speed card reader, and what it read was the punch cards for computer, but from the banking system. And even up into the 70s, actually into the 80s, there were banks that still used those old-fashioned address cards, and you would send your payment in, and the girl would put these things through, and they would shoot through, and it was air-driven. The card floated on air, and a guy actually opened up one of them. What was wrong with it was the rollers that rolled the card through got glazed, and they were slipping. So he opened the entire machine up and sprayed WD-40 on all the pulleys and everything. Now, I can just imagine that guy at a party telling everybody how he uses WD-40 to fix everything. But guess who got that machine? And guess who had to take it totally apart and degrease all the parts and then put it all back together and put the lubrication where it belonged. And I want to say WD-40 is not a lubrication. It's a water displacement, WD. It re-lubricates, it re-loosens lubrications. That's why it works. So if you got some old oil down in something and you spray it, it loosens it off. Also, 3-in-1 oil is terrible stuff. That's got a penetrating stuff in it, a cleaner. Motor oil is like one of the best things you could use. Just a drop of motor oil in the right place can fix so many things. But, I see so many guys on the internet, and they tell you, like these little, do you see this little tuning capacitor here? what happens inside is there's a as it moves, there's a plates, and they have to be connected to the fixed uh, contact point that's soldered to the board. So there's a shaft, and there's a thing like this that rides on it, like this. Okay? Well, it gets oxidized because it's made out of brass. Well, what you have to do is you move the control back and forth like 20 times, and it does get better. And if it doesn't get better, you got to change the thing. Now, other guys are telling you, oh, it's worn through the spacers between the plates, and you got to drop some. And they always mentioned uh, stupid super glue with the technical name, and that's a bullshit answer. Okay, you drop super glue into one of these, it's dead. You spray cleaner into this, does no good at all. It will never reach that point in the middle that oxidizes. Okay, and it messes this up. It might even eat the plastic. Okay, depending on the cleaner you bought, because cleaners, spray cleaners like tuna cleaners and all that, I think it used to be called blue foam and all. They have an acid in them that cleans, but then 2 3 weeks later, it's like using eye drops on your eye. After a while, your eye is tearing because of the eye drops, and it's become addicted to the eye drops. Okay, and it's the same thing with the tuner cleaner. You put tuner cleaner in there, and the television would work for a while, and then you'd have to go in there and spray it again. And I used to use one of these in there and make sure all the contacts were springy. And then at some point, you have to send the tuner out and get it fixed, or renew points in there, because when you looked at the points and they were gold plated, they really wore down on a tuner on a television set. But I'm a no spray guy. I won't even spray a radio if I'm selling it to someone, because I know it'll work better for a few days. That's terrible to do that to somebody. Okay, but yeah, these guys, yeah, just spray some WD-40 into it. Well, oh boy, they're not the person that has to fix the thing later on. And they're the person, oh, that guy repaired my car. He charged me so much money. It's probably something simple. And that one lady I told you, it's probably just a tube. I said, there's no tubes in that. And then she looks at me like I was crazy. Okay, I had a couple come into the Radio Shack, and they're looking at it was a flavor radio about this size. How do we know it's solid state? Because it didn't say anymore. It was 1975. And I said, there's no tubes in it. And they didn't understand that solid state meant no tubes. They just wanted something that was solid state. If you showed it to them, they wouldn't be able to tell difference. They just know what they thought they wanted. And I said, no, all our transistor radios in Radio Shack don't have tubes. They're all solid state. And I explained to them solid state means the matter in the transistor is a solid block of germanium back in the old days, silicon. There's no vacuum involved. The electrons flow through a solid medium. You can explain it in great detail, but they walked out because my radios did not say solid state on them. That's the stuff. This is the people you run into, and then when you get my age and you have a great memory, you start thinking back, what the hell is with people? You're being honest with them, but see, they're so used to being lied to by other salespeople. When you tell them the truth, they're not gonna listen to you. And that's why I have such a chip on my shoulder, is because I was a guy that had always fixed something that somebody else screwed with. And then that other person would prance around after I fixed it like they had gotten it almost to where it worked, and all I had to do was come in and really fix it. Okay? And that's some of the stuff I put up with. And they did not like me at work. There were guys there, oh, he takes his stuff home and he sleeps with it. And that's sort of true. When I was a little kid, my dad would bring stuff home from work. He was a tool maker, and he had little tubes, cardboard tubes that hooked together, and they would have cutting bits in them. And he would bring them home to me. And when I was a little kid, I'd go to bed with them. And then overnight, my mother would come in and take them and make them disappear. But when I went to bed, I always had something in my hand. Okay, and it was always something cheap, free. My father would bring me stuff home from work. But so when that guy said that, yeah, he probably sleeps with the stuff, it's pretty funny. I was into electronics so much, and I hid in electronics so much, it actually interfered with my regular life. Okay, when you'd go to a party, people don't say to you, "Hi, how you doing?" Blah blah blah. No, it's like, I got this radio, I got this stereo, I got this VCR, I got the. So it was funny. A year later, Years later, I'm walking through town, and I bump into a guy that was a dentist. I went to high school with him, and I just said to him, "When you're at a party, what do people talk to you about?" He goes, "Oh," he says, "they open their mouth and point to their teeth. Hey," and I won't say the guy's name, but, "Hey, can you look at this tooth? What do you think?" I said, "You got to be kidding." He goes, "No." He goes, "I'm not kidding." They always have a dentistry a question, but they don't come to him. Okay, I was like, and I was telling him, I said, "Yeah, when I'm at a party or anything, people always, I got this, don't work. Can you look at it? Look at it means fix it for free, by the way." And the worst, I mean, absolute worst. I'm at my dad's funeral, or at my dad's wake, and this kid comes in. His family is famous for being screw ups. And I look and I say to the guys with me, um, "This kid's going to want something." "What do you mean?" "Oh, he's not coming to see my father. He just knows where I am." And he walks over and he goes, "Can you come out and look at my car radio a minute?" And one of my friends just picked him up by the scruff of the neck and threw him out of the funeral parlor. Okay. He goes, was that guy for real?" I said, "The whole family's like that." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "They're all like that. I won't mention the name of the family, but they're oblivious to what's going on." But he's saying, "Oh, I know where John will be tonight. His dad died. He's up at the funeral parlor. I'll go in there I'll park my car outside. I'll go inside, and surely he'll come out and look at the radio for me." Yeah, yeah, that's it. I have some good stories because I have that face. I always tell you I have that face. I have that personality, and people just walk all over me. And then when I do stick up for myself, they turn it around on me. "What are you in such a bad mood for?" Well, what I didn't learn in life, I'm going to teach you. Another thing I'm going to teach you, I had to learn the hard way. At a certain time in life, you have to start getting rid of your friends. You have to move on. You got to move on to friends that you enjoy being around at your same level. I kept friends that weren't as smart as me, weren't interested in the things I was interested, but I kept them out of loyalty, and I always tried to help them. And that's not what you're supposed to do in life. Now, my mother sort of was telling me, you got to you got to get some new friends, and I would get new friends from school, but all they want to do is sneak off and go smoking, sneak off and go drinking, sneak off and do drugs. And I would tell my mother. My mother would say, "Oh, you're just making that up." I was being honest. Uh, in school, when I went to school, everybody was sneaking off smoking, drinking, and then drugs came along, okay? They weren't out there, "Let's go play basketball." A few of them did, but those were the jocks. And when you go play basketball with them, you suck. You just suck because they're good at it, you know? But I went through a lot, but I just wanted to show you and tell you about, inside of these transistor radios. And be very careful inside if you actually go for it. But there are models of radios, and they're better for beginners. These are crammed, but I take it real slow. Even with my skill set, I showed you my vise the last time. I mount this in a vise. I desolder the solder. I take the solder off, and I look for the outline of the part. I get my Harbor Freight X-Acto knife that's padded, and I put that underneath the pin, and I heat it, and I lift it up. And then I pull the capacitors out. Do the two legs, and out comes the capacitor. And I showed you my diagram. Okay? I do not believe I could remember which way something can go in. And it's very simple, but I'm dyslexic. Also, I have like this defeatist attitude against myself. And you got to be so careful that you don't break a trace. Or at least if you break it, you know where to bridge it to where it came from. There's so many things that can happen right in this little area here. And like I said, I took a shot of this because the wires are going off the circuit board to this volume control. And the wires are very brittle. And they were brittle back when the radio was made. And without having the schematics for this, and the pictorials of where those wires go, you could spend hours figuring out where it goes. Now, sometimes if it breaks, you can see the fuzzy little lead sticking up out of the trace. And that's where the speaker wire went. Now, this radio does not work. I got the capacitor that went between the volume control and the radio itself was open. Okay, and that will keep it from working. When I turned it and clicked it on, You could hear the volume control when I rotated the volume control. That means the audio section's working. And I didn't use my buzzer on it. Okay, and this thing works really good. I didn't, because I'm like, you know what? The last two radios didn't work, and because the capacitors were really bad. So before I'm even going to start, there's 4 capacitors. I have them in stock in my parts, and I can rob them off other stuff. Anyway, 4 new capacitors on there, turn it on, and work from there. I don't like troubleshooting back to something I should have changed. Okay, I know this is 50 years old. I know the capacitors are dried out. To start troubleshooting it, it's doable, but you're only going to lead to the same conclusion. Change the capacitors. Okay. Now there are other people that troubleshoot like that, and then yeah, this cap's open, right? Well, if you can fix something by changing it, it's called shotgunning, and other guys used to make fun of you at work. Oh, you're shotgunning it. Shotgunning means you shoot it, and shotgun, when you pull the trigger, it doesn't have just one bullet. It's got a bunch of BBs that come out, or pellets, and they come out and they spread over a wide area. And that's why they call it shotgunning, because when you shotgun it, you're going over a wide area. You're changing all 4 capacitors at once. And then you turn the radio on, it works. And that's not cherry picking. Cherry picking is when you pick something up that says bad speaker, you put a new speaker in and it works. That's cherry picking. What this shotgunning is, you're changing a wide variety of parts that you know were probably bad, and then the radio comes on. That's shotgunning it. But there's so many terms that you use when you work in this field, and cherry picking. Oh, and the other one was a shoemaker. A shoemaker, if you ever saw him fix shoes, it's not a real perfect art. It's not really precision. Uses a lot of glue, but at the end the shoes look really good. But when you worked in electronics, if they wanted to insult you, especially your first few days, and they walk over and you're doing something, they call you a shoemaker, just to make themselves feel bad or better. And then after a few months, they'd be sorry they ever said that to me. But that's some of the terms they do to you. And like I said, these internet groups, you can get some really bad information. Because the guy with this tuning cap, when I got to get back to work because I drift. He said that you put like super glue in there because the insulator got a gouge in it. Now by putting it super glue down there, it'll flow in and fill in that gouge. Okay, but meanwhile it's touching everything else and stopping it from working. But in his mind, the glue is going to go to the problem. That's how these mental patients think. Okay, their scenario in their head is always perfect, and then you have to go repair the thing. And you're like, why is super glue all through this, you know? And then super glue, depending on some parts, it doesn't stick to. It does stick to your fingers. And you clean it all up, and then you fix what's really wrong with it. And then you give it back to the guy, and he's like, oh, I almost had it fixed. What I learned now is I don't fix nothing for anyone but myself now, okay? And the look on these people, you won't look at it? No, no. I said, I can't get the parts. Well, don't Radio Shack. They're still on that Radio Shack thing. There's one Radio Shack near here. And they believe Radio Shack has every part to fix everything. That's how messed up they are. You know, I'm like, did you ever go in a Radio Shack? There's like nothing in its store now. It's mostly whole radios. They do sell like a soldering iron, some solder. Maybe an assortment pack of wire. Do they even sell that anymore? You know, because there's very few people building and repairing. And you look on the internet, it seems like there's a lot of people building and repairing, but it's dropping off on the internet. Trust me on that. Go look. A lot of videos are older videos that you're watching. The newer ones, here's another term, cake walking. If you've ever been to a wedding, they bring the cake out and the girls walk back and forth with it. When someone says cake walking, in other words, a person's plugging in a circuit board into a computer and putting 2 screws in, if they even put the 2 screws in. And that's a cakewalk. And then they turn it on, the computer comes up and it acknowledges the memories there. That's a cakewalk. That's another insult. Oh, the boss will tell you, oh, that job's a cakewalk. And it's not. And then you get down there and then you're having problems with it. He comes over and he realizes how bad it is. He can't wait to get out of there because he said it was going to be a cakewalk. And then you figure it out. You stay with something long enough, you figure out. Oh, you also go ask engineers. Where I used to work at RCA, I had this one guy, Ken Recor. He's deceased now. He was real good, and he could tell me what to go look for, what a document to look for that would explain certain things. But RCA was mostly test equipment. I had a pretty good knowledge of it. The problem was getting some of the parts, relays and stuff like that, because my boss, he didn't like spending more than $30 for something. And I would find a bunch of old relays up in the safe. Each floor had a safe, like a bank safe, and that's where you stored your parts and locked it up at night so people wouldn't steal them. And in the safe, I found a box of old relays from over the years that people just they kept. They were bad, but the coils were good, and some of the contacts were good. And I just took a bunch of them apart, inspected them, read the specs on the relays, and I'm not talking a little relay. I'm talking big honking relays, and they're self cleaners. As they come down, it would go like this. Okay, so it didn't go like that. It went like that, and they would wear the contacts, but it would keep them clean. So I would rebuild relays and put them back in service. And then the big boss, he would okay it or whatever, or he'd say he's going to still send for the relay, and he wouldn't. After 2 or 3 days it was working, he didn't send for the relay. And it was amazing stuff, but I was in everything. I never ran from anything. And my teacher in Retz, I went to Retz in Nutley Technical School. It's now a campus for a college. I went there, and he said at the end he was evaluating each student in front of each other, and he said Kleinbauer's not afraid to jump in there. I'm not. I'm not. I want to jump in there. I want the challenge, and I know no one else is jumping in there. But they all have advice. You know, that's the fun thing. When people don't know what they're doing, they still run their mouth. And when you find it, what's wrong, they want on the side to find out from you what's wrong, so then they can go around and say they fixed it, or they were sure it was this or that. There's some real wackadoodles out there, and I know you worked with them. You know, you're like, oh, I got a guy I work with. He takes credit for everything I do. Oh, yeah, they're out there. I think that's it. All right, that's it.